In this video, we will explain why the idea of the one has quietly undermined modern relationships. Why searching for a perfect partner often leads to disappointment rather than fulfillment. And how this belief shapes your expectations without you realizing it. Stick until the end, because by the time you finish this video, you will be able to recognize the myths that sabotage your dating life, understand what actually creates lasting connection, and move from chasing fantasy to building something real. Most men do not struggle with relationships because they consistently choose the wrong person. They struggle because they are chasing an image of a relationship that was never designed to exist in real life. The idea of the one promises certainty, ease, and emotional completion. A partner who feels perfectly aligned, effortlessly compatible, and endlessly validating. If you have been dating, swiping, investing emotionally, and still finding yourself disappointed, restless, or questioning your own judgment, the issue may not be your standards. It may be the framework itself. This conversation is about dismantling that framework and replacing it with one that actually supports stability, traction, and psychological safety. The peril of partner perfection. The belief in a perfect partner did not come from psychology or long-term relationship research. It came from stories, movies, novels, advertising, and now social media have trained people to associate love with intensity and effortlessness at the same time. Today, influencer culture amplifies this illusion. You see couples who appear perfectly attuned, endlessly affectionate, and conflict-free. What you are seeing is not relational depth. It is curated performance. The nervous system does not differentiate between performance and reality. Repeated exposure creates expectation. When a real relationship feels ordinary, requires effort, or includes misunderstanding, it feels wrong by comparison. Not because something is broken, but because it does not match the fantasy. This is why many men describe feeling bored or doubtful in healthy relationships while feeling intensely drawn to unstable ones. The nervous system confuses familiarity with excitement. This dynamic shows up clearly in real life. You meet someone who is consistent, emotionally available, and communicative. On paper, everything looks right. But there is no spike of adrenaline, no dramatic tension. Meanwhile, a previous relationship filled with unpredictability still feels magnetic in memory. What you are missing is not love. It is emotional dysregulation. Stability feels flat only when chaos has been mistaken for chemistry. The writer, Lingdebatten, captured this perfectly when he said, "We are drawn to partners who recreate the emotional patterns of our childhood not because they are healthy, but because they are familiar. When perfection is defined by intensity instead of safety, the search itself becomes self-defeating, societal scripts, and sabotage." Dating apps intensified these dynamics. Not because having options is inherently harmful, but because endless options weaken commitment. When you believe there is always someone better one swipe away, depth feels risky, investment feels premature, discomfort feels unnecessary. Why work through misunderstanding when a clean slate seems instantly available? This creates the paradox of choice. Psychologist Barry Schwartz famously noted that increased choice does not create freedom, but paralysis and dissatisfaction. In dating, this means every relationship is subconsciously compared to hypothetical alternatives. Even good connections begin to feel provisional, as though they are being held against an invisible standard that no real person can meet. Layered on top of this are inherited expectations, family narratives, cultural timelines, silent benchmarks absorbed without conscious consent. By a certain age, you should be partnered. By another, you should be settled. These pressures shift motivation. You stop looking for alignment and start looking for relief. Relief from judgment. Relief from comparison. Relief from uncertainty. A common real-life example is the man who enters a relationship not because it feels right, but because it feels late. He ignores early signals of mismatch, tells himself attraction will grow, and commits out of fear of falling behind. Months later, resentment appears. Not because his partner changed, but because the relationship was chosen under pressure, rather than clarity. Redefining relationship riches. Healthy relationships are not built on perfect compatibility. They are built on conscious incompatibility. Differences that are understood, respected, and navigated intentionally. The strongest partnerships are not mirrors. They are systems with complementary strengths and negotiated weaknesses. This is where the idea of good enough becomes powerful, not as resignation, but as realism. Psychologist Donald Winnicott introduced the concept of the good enough parent, explaining that perfection is neither possible nor desirable. The same applies to relationships. Good enough does not mean ignoring red flags or tolerating harm. It means choosing someone whose values align with yours, whose flaws are workable, and whose presence supports regulation rather than chaos. A real example of this shift looks like a man realizing that his partner will never anticipate his needs intuitively, but is consistently willing to listen and adjust when they are expressed. Instead of seeing this as a failure of compatibility, he recognizes it as a functional dynamic. Communication replaces fantasy. Stability replaces guessing. The novelist Milan Kundera wrote, "The more perfect the lover, the more he resembles a ghost." Idealized partners are often empty containers for projection. Real people come with limits, habits, and edges. Learning to love within those limits is where intimacy actually forms, crafting a realistic partnership vision. Before you can choose well, you need self-awareness. Not abstract insight, but pattern recognition. Who you are drawn to, who you avoid, which emotional states feel familiar even when they are unhealthy. Many men mistake familiarity for compatibility and call it chemistry, until the same unmet needs resurface as frustration or withdrawal. Realistic expectations do not kill romance. They stabilize it. You stop expecting another person to regulate your self-worth, soothe your insecurity, or complete your identity. You meet them as a partner, not a solution. Empathy becomes possible when fantasy dissolves. Flexibility replaces rigidity. Flaws become information rather than automatic disqualifiers. A practical example is learning the difference between conflict and incompatibility. Two people disagree on how to spend money. One sees this as a sign they are not meant to be together. Another sees it as a skill gap that can be addressed through conversation and boundaries. The outcome depends less on compatibility and more on emotional maturity. Embracing your authentic love story. There is freedom in letting go of the ideal. You stop auditioning partners. You stop auditioning yourself. You begin participating instead of performing. Real relationships are not static. They evolve. What works in one phase will require adjustment in another. That does not mean something is wrong. It means the relationship is alive. Connection is not only emotional, it is physiological. Your nervous system assesses safety before your mind forms meaning. When two regulated people interact, co-regulation happens naturally. Calm spreads. Presence replaces posturing. This is why some relationships feel easy without being perfect. The body feels safe enough to remain open. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote that love consists in two solitudes that protect and border and greet each other. That definition leaves no room for completion fantasies. It speaks instead to mutual respect, autonomy, and growth side by side. The idea of the one promised certainty, what it delivered was chronic dissatisfaction and perpetual searching. Real partnership is not found. It is built through awareness, choice, patience, and tolerance for imperfection. If you feel exhausted by dating, tired of performing, or stuck questioning whether something is wrong with you, that exhaustion is information. It is pointing you away from fantasy and toward reality. Inner Helm exists to support that shift. From chasing intensity to building depth. From projection to clarity. From external validation to internal steadiness. If this video helped you see relationships differently, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us. These conversations are ongoing and they build over time. The work is not about finding the perfect relationship. It is about becoming grounded enough to sustain a real one.